Hello and welcome to Steve and Dave's 50 years ago this month. This time around, we're talking about September 1971, a fantastic month for rock and roll.
For sure.
Steve, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I do. I would agree, Dave. There's this fantastic month for rock music, for pop music, maybe none better, who knows. At number one in mid-September was that lad from Utah, Donnie Osmond, with Go Away Little Girl, which really, I think in many ways, marked his ascendancy to a kind of, teen idol stardom. He was obviously a part of the Osmonds, part of this brothers act, but he was extracted from it and sort of put on center stage, and he hits number one with Go Away Little Girl. Interestingly, this song had charted several times before. It had charted twice in the 60s, once with The Happenings, and then in earlier in 63, Steve Lawrence took it to number one. And so this was a familiar song.
The first time ever that one song hit number one with two different interpretations. Right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's and it's fascinating in that this was a song penned by the classic songwriting duo of Jerry Goffin and Carole King. And I don't know that it's necessarily really associated with Goffin and King. I don't know that but it's obviously an important number for them. And it's interesting. This, Donnie Osmond in this era is still a young man. You can see, here's the 45 sleeve.
He's 13 years old.
Yes, 13 years old. Right? One wonders about all of this. If you could ask Donnie Osmond questions about this era, how comfortable was he being a teen idol? How comfortable was he being sort of pulled out of the brothers act? His brothers were quite a bit older than he was. He was, in fact, there was a separation of well over a decade in a couple of cases with the performing Osmonds. Yet he was extracted and he was given center stage. And the other thing go ahead.
In a way that you really did not see, there are a lot of parallels with the Jackson 5, right?
Yeah.
But you did not see Michael Jackson being singled out in the same way. I mean, he's going to have a hit coming up here, I think, in '72 with Ben, right? But he didn't become the solo act that Donnie Osmond did until the early '80s.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, I think that you're right. I think that when Michael Jackson, the Off the Wall album in the late 70s, really launched him into kind of superstardom, a solo superstardom. It's also the case that Michael Jackson's appearance as a kind of solo act happened when the Jacksons were sort of at least plateaued. The Osmonds were still a raging hot act. And so it must have been a kind of, I would have wondered if it had been an uncomfortable experience. That would be something I'd always would like to hear from him. The other thing is that the Osmonds were devout Mormons. And I always wondered about the role of their faith in terms of sort of the selection of music, if that played a factor in it at all. Because they were, in fact, at this era, it's my sense at least, that they were the most visible, most identifiable Mormons, not only in the United States, but maybe in the world.
Apart from maybe the Mormon Tabernacle Choir or something, but
that's right. Yeah, but apart from that, and so it's always been curious to me because the faith obviously was really important to them. I'm interested in this in part because when you look at the Osmonds, in some of their musical choices, the Osmonds, they played their instruments. They had a real edge. I mean, you listen to something like Crazy Horses. Oh yeah, and that song rocks.
It does. Absolutely.
It really, really rocks. And you just wonder if maybe that group would have, had given their druthers, maybe kind of gravitated more in that direction, because they ended up being a fairly kind of, very vanilla kind of act. And I just wonder how much they had a say in it. And I wondered the same thing about Donnie Osmond in terms of, was it in fact his choice to be sort of singled out this way? Because it always seemed to me a little bit that he was slightly uncomfortable with the adulation. Not that the solo the solo piece didn't fit easily on his shoulders. It seemed to me that he was at least as comfortable with the brothers and performing with Murray, and maybe even more. That's just sort of my take on it. I wonder, but a couple things about Donnie Osmond that are, I think, surprising as a solo act. Now, this is just Donnie, not with the brothers, not with Murray. He put 13 top 40 singles on the charts. It's a straight, and he had 6 top 10 hits, and of course this hit number 1. I mean, he was enormously successful as a solo act, enormously.
But you were talking about selection of music, selection of songs and things like that. Taking a look at the songs that they were selecting for him to sing, a lot of them were covers of very successful hits from earlier.
That's right. That's right.
Like Puppy Love, Too Young, Young Love,
Yep.
Sweet and Innocent.
Yes.
Sweet and Innocent was his first solo hit. We
That's right.
talked about this just a couple months ago.
Right.
But you see kind of a theme to all of this. He's, like we said, he's 13 years old when he sings "Go Away, Little Girl," and these are all talking about romantic relationships between between kids.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, and it's a little bit strange. I mean, clearly, given his situation, given who he was, maybe a natural choice, but still, it's just they just keep beating that horse, you know.
I agree. No, that's exactly right. Keep beating that horse, and you just wonder where those choices were being made. Their family famously was very involved in their career. Father was a manager, all of that. You just wonder. And given the opportunity, would the brothers have made different kinds of musical choices? Because a couple of their songs, I mean, Down by the Lazy River, even something like Crazy Horses, and they sort of pop in a way that their other music never really did. And so, I mean, it just really, there's something behind it. So there you go.
I think we should say a little bit about Go Away, Little Girl.
Okay. Yeah.
In terms of, all right, the song's about this young man very attracted to a girl or a young woman who's not his girlfriend, and is so tempting that he wants her to go away so that he is not tempted into infidelity, right? But it's strange because, as you said before, the first person to have a #1 hit with this was Steve Lawrence.
That's right.
And Steve Lawrence, as far as anyone knows, is not a pedophile. So when he sings "Go Away, Little Girl," right? Isn't this just basically some standard machoism, misogyny of the time? You're talking to presumably at least a young woman.
I think that's right.
Right?
Yeah,
and calling her a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, so right, from the early 60s, this is how this all played out, right? The language of the day and all of that.
Little girl, kind of a term of endearment even, right?
Yes, I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Yeah. When Steve Lawrence sang it in 63, yeah.
And Jerry Goffin was the lyricist of the Goffin.
Yes.
King.
Yeah.
So it's strange. This is really, for me, I think, a real throwback, and something I don't think you can get away with anymore, unless maybe you're a 13-year-old. Maybe a 13-year-old could.
No, I think it'd be problematic. I think you're right. I think it'd be problematic. I mean, it was odd enough when, as you break this down, it's odd enough to think about Donnie Osmond talking about this, because it would be, yeah. There's something about this though that, I mean, obviously Donnie Osmond is being elevated to a point where, I mean, he's so identifiable. I mean, just as we think about this, if it's 1971, the the hundreds of thousands of notebooks and lunch boxes and trapper keepers and all that kind of stuff with his image plastered on them, and we wonder about the toll that this took on him a little bit. Just seems to me a lot to be put on his shoulders. And again, I go back to this earlier question. You just wonder how much he had to say in all of this. Was this really his idea to be the solo star?
But you look at child stars. Well, look at Michael Jackson. You have people who clearly were dealing with some major issues as adults.
Well, absolutely, that's right.
Right.
I mean, few places more dysfunctional than, yeah.
You look at Donnie Osmond, and you see someone. I see someone who seems to be incredibly well adjusted. I think that's fair. I think that you would look at the Osmond situation and see, a family that was well adjusted, that was loving, that, I think all no
of that.
apparent drug problems, no drug overdoses, no addictions.
Cooperative, no backbiting, no lawsuits filed over copyright infringement or, all this kind of stuff. I think that's right.
So
it's a very different situation.
And even as a solo artist, he did a lot of his touring as a member of the Osmonds. The Osmonds incorporated his solo material into their.
That's true. No, that's absolutely right.
Tours and so on.
Yeah, for decades. Yeah, that's right. Okay, well, so we have Donnie Osmond at number one with "Go Away, Little Girl." Number two is the Queen of Soul with her version of Spanish Harlem, Aretha Franklin, of course. Dave, a couple words about Spanish Harlem and Aretha Franklin.
Well, you talk about her version because there are so many versions, right?
That's right.
A whole, just gobs. Notably Cliff Richards, but this was actually written by a couple of fairly well-known producers. There's Phil Spector was one half of that writing team.
That's right.
And the other half was
Jerry Lieber.
Jerry Lieber.
Of Lieber and Stoller fame.
Co-produced with Loller and Lieber and Stoller
produced this.
Were also a songwriting team and a producing team.
Oh yeah,
responsible for things like Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock, Yakety Yak. So there were some very talented people who did a lot later on in their careers.
Absolutely. And so again, probably the most famous version of Spanish Harlem is the Benny King version, Benny King of the Drifters. Maybe he recorded the definitive version, but Aretha Franklin in this period is making a lot of covers. And the covers are incredible. She really makes them their own. We talked, for example, a couple months ago about her take on Bridge Over Troubled Waters. It's just,
right.
She is, she has this kind of way to sort of just transform a song and take it over. And she does the same thing here with Spanish Harlem. And so there we go. At number two, then, the amazing Aretha Franklin.
She's going to do the same thing with Carole King. We talked about.
That's right.
1971 is kind of the year of Carole King, right? But we just saw it with Go Away, Little Girl, charting at number one for the second time. Royalties just rolling in addition to her own work. And she's going to, Aretha Franklin is going to end up covering the Carole King song, You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman.
That's exactly right. At number three, then, you have this really interesting figure, a guy named Bill Withers, with his smash, Ain't No Sunshine, which has, I think, over time emerged as a kind of classic. It's, I think, one of those songs that people will be singing and humming for decades and decades to come. Bill Withers is a fascinating individual in that he didn't have really much musical training, almost zero formal training. He grew up in West Virginia, a little place called Slab Fork, went to the Navy. Then once he emerged from the Navy, he was relocated to California, where he was involved in various kinds of jobs involving assembly work. And it's upon leaving the Navy in his sort of early to mid-20s that Bill Withers decided I think I'll learn to play guitar. I think I'll learn to sort of write songs. And so he sets upon this task of teaching himself to be, a songwriter, to be a musician in a sense. And what's so fascinating about this is that he approaches this in almost a kind of workmanlike fashion, maybe in the same way that he would, bring that kind of attention to his work on the assembly lines and whatnot. And he hits with this amazing song. That when Ain't No Sunshine came out and was making, a lot of waves, Withers didn't immediately quit his assembly job. That he hung on to that job because, well, you just never know. Because I think Withers recognized from the very beginning that the music industry is a fickle one. And there are some things you can count on and some things you can't count on. And this music thing could just disappear in a moment. But Ain't No Sunshine is, it's a classic. Dave, got a couple thoughts about this, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's hard to imagine. This is one of those songs where a cover just seems completely superfluous, right?
Yeah, right.
Because it's hard to imagine anyone doing justice to this, coming anywhere close to what Bill Withers does with it. So yeah, I think that this is the first, my first acquaintance with Bill Withers,
right.
And just blows you away. It's so good.
It is so good. There is something raw, something kind of unpolished, unvarnished, something so real about this song. For example, the third verse, the I knows, it's 26 times, this it's perfect. It's just perfect. The other thing about this record is that it's so well produced. Booker T. Jones had a big hand in the production, and also that big hand in the in playing on the record. So you have Booker T on keyboards, you have Donald Duck Dunn, again of the Booker T and the MGs, on bass, you have Al Jackson on drums, and instead of Steve Cropper on guitars, you have this guy named Stephen Sills, who is playing a guitar on this cut. So it's just creme de la creme of musicianship as well. It's just, there's something about this record that's almost, I don't want to say perfect, but a lot of Stax guys. Yeah, a lot of Stax guys. It's just, it's an incredible moment, and it really launches then Withers on a fantastic career, but it was kind of like a skyrocket, right? And so Withers' career lasts for roughly about a decade, and then he famously kind of just steps away from it all. And Withers was famously stubborn, and he could not be and would not be pushed around. And when he stepped away from music, he stepped away from music. And so he wanted he wanted things done his way, whether it was on the records or in his own sort of life. And passed away I think passed away just recently. Yeah, just last year, in fact. But fascinating character, fascinating individual. And this song is it's just so powerful.
Oh yeah, and a lot of his stuff is just really incredible.
That's right. I think there's something about this that his music comes from maybe almost a kind of different place that I don't want to overstate this, but there's something that's so soulful and something so real about Withers' work. For example, on this first album of Withers, he also has the song Grandma's Hands, which is also incredibly powerful. It's just, he has a way of writing that really, I think, touches people, and it just comes from a place that is completely unvarnished. It's just really, he's exceptional. He's an exceptional musician. At number 4, then, here we go. It's just incredible, these songs. So at number 4, you've got this Scottish singer, a guy named Rod Stewart, with this incredible single, the double A side, Maggie May and Reason to Believe.
Right. And well, originally it was released as with Reason to Believe as the A side, right, and Maggie May as B side, but apparently disc jockeys just kind of took it into their own hands, right, and made Maggie May into the hit of that single. This was released on my 10th birthday, August 2nd, 1971.
Awesome.
And I remember I just really loved Maggie May. Listening to the radio every time it came on, it's just like, oh yeah. And I did not hear Reason to Believe until years later.
Mhm.
Also a great song. I mean, it's a fantastic single. It's
Oh yeah,
hard to beat a single like this.
absolutely.
But Maggie May was, of course, the song that made Rod Stewart a name for me
I think that's
and
right.
for millions of other people.
I think that's right. Absolutely.
He had been the lead singer of the Faces for quite a while, but this was already this was from his third solo album.
Yes.
Pictures. Every picture tells a story.
That's right.
And so Rod Stewart never really believed in the Faces. He said, they're great musicians, everyone, but we never really gelled as a group. And the people that thought the Faces were so great are hearing something that I never heard. So strange, right?
It's so strange because I think Rod Stewart was the only one who didn't hear something incredible. Faces were amazing. Faces were amazing. They were a great group. And
after Maggie May, they started to get billed differently as Rod Stewart with the Faces.
That's right.
Faces with Rod Stewart or whatever, which of course eventually led to the dissolution.
Well, that's exactly right. Ronnie Lane, for example, had enough. He stepped away from this as soon as it started to this change of billing. I mean, he'd had enough, and it ended pretty quickly thereafter. But this is Rod Stewart's song. Though. This is the song, as you said, that made him kind of a household name, household figure. This is Rod Stewart has a kind of Mount Rushmore. This is on the Mount Rushmore. Maggie May is, it's quintessential Rod.
Yeah, and this is a true story according to Stewart, although what he tells is a little bit different than what I was hearing from the song.
Yeah, true-ish. Yeah, right.
I heard a guy that was in a relationship with an older woman, right? And she's just kind of, she's the dominant one, and he's just kind of her sex toy. And he's starting to question his role. He's starting to question whether that's what he wants. The actual story was that he went to a concert, of course, at the Beaulieu Jazz Festival, 1961, and was just seduced in a beer tent by a woman twice his age. And and that was it. I mean, it was less than a one-night stand. He said the encounter was over in a few seconds. But the name, he may never have even known what her name was, but the name Maggie May, he got from a song from Liverpool about a prostitute.
Oh, goodness. Okay.
Maggie May, or she may not, that's, he loved that wordplay too. So he wrote this together with Martin Quittenton from the band Steamhammer.
Yeah.
Who had some chords and had some music that they liked. What really made Maggie May stand out, I think, musically, was the mandolin. This was the first
yes, I agree.
pop song to use a mandolin.
Yeah.
Stewart liked it so much that he went on, he used it for a second song on the album, Mandolin Wind.
Mandolin Wind, yes. Yeah.
But the mandolin player was kind of treated like a redheaded stepchild. He was credited as the mandolin player from Lindisfarne. I don't remember his name. That was the credit for the mandolin.
Oh, how delightful.
Ray Jackson was the guy's name, and he wasn't all too pleased about that. Especially, as I said, considering what it made of this song.
Oh, it makes the song. Yeah, it's the most important part of the song in the intro and at the ending. I mean, that's the song.
Yeah. So You know, the funny thing about Mag May is, as important as it was, as huge as it became, it almost didn't make it on the album because um, nobody really, including Stewart, didn't really have confidence.
Yeah.
He said, quote, "At first, I didn't think much of Maggie Mee. I guess that's because the record company didn't believe in the song. I didn't have much confidence then. I figured it was best to listen to the guys who knew better. What I learned is sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't."
Yeah, that's right.
End quote.
That's right.
But you know, it doesn't have a chorus. It doesn't have any of the things that, you know, conventional wisdom says a hit song needs.
That's right.
So really, we have the DJs to thank for this one, I think.
That's exactly right. You know, there's something about Maggie May that it's, you know, such a departure. It's such an unusual song for the era. It's Rod Stewart. There's this kind of where Rod Stewart comes together with sort of a folky sound. I think that's Rod Stewart oftentimes at his best, ballads and folk numbers. And this is, you know, there's something about this that comes together in a very unusual way. But right, you could see why people would hear this and think, well, I'm not sure this really belongs on the album, because if you listen to the album, it really kind of like, I mean, again, Mandolin Wind, they use the mandolin again, but there's something about it just is a bit sort of, you know, out of step, but it is perfect in a way, just a perfect song.
Again, Stewart, quote, "It didn't have a chorus. It just had these rambling verses. It didn't really have a hook. How could you hope to have a hit single with a song that was all verse and no chorus and no hook?" End quote.
Well, it's, yeah, how can you? So it's the imagery, it's the mandolin. These things come together. I mean, it's a great song. It's a great song, right?
Just go into Reason to Believe for a second.
Yeah, please.
That was written by a guy named Hardin. Let's see. Don't want to lie. Steve Hardin? Tim Hardin.
Tim Hardin. Yes.
Who also wrote If I Were a Carpenter, for instance.
Right. That's right.
Had some moderate success. No, actually had very little success himself as an artist. But his stuff has been covered by so many, including Reason to Believe. It's just been covered by a lot of people. So as a songwriter, he had some success. And of course, Reason to Believe, I think with these two, Reason to Believe and Maggie May, that made Every Picture Tells a Story a real blockbuster. It really, it put Stewart on the map, and Maggie May and Every Picture Tells a Story were at the #1 position, the single and the album, in the US and in England at the same time. And Stewart never repeated that kind of success again with any of his songs.
No, that's right. I think this is Rod Stewart at his greatest. These early Atlantic albums, the Rod Stewart album, Gasoline Alley, Every Picture Tells a Story. These early albums are just magnificent. Part of it is, again, much of the material is fueled by the faces. And the other thing is that the selection of songs is just really extraordinary. I mean, Rod Stewart has always been an interpreter of the music of others. And I think a very skilled interpreter, but he was just never better than these early years. I think he was always in that way sort of chasing this early success and these early achievements.
This single was at #1 for 5 weeks. And for 2 of those weeks, the 3rd and 4th week, they blocked the Carpenters' Superstar from making it to #1.
Well, that's a well, there you go. That's hard to do in this era. The Carpenters ruled the world, it seemed, at this time. So
yeah.
And a magnificent song, and Rod Stewart at his height of heights. Yeah. At #5, then, speaking of height of heights, it's just, so you've got this couple, Paul and Linda McCartney. Perhaps you've heard of them, and this very unusual song at #5, quirky number, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey.
Yeah, I can remember listening to this on the radio too. Just, it was a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
And Oh, I'm sorry. This was the song. I'm sorry. This was the song, not Maggie May, that was released on my 10th birthday.
Ah, there you go.
And it made it to number one on September 4th. So this was the first number one by a Beatles, an ex-Beatle since the breakup. And of course, the first of a whole string of songs. By the way, this was also the first, this broke a record. With this, McCartney had written a gold record hit for each of the 8 years, starting with, I think, I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah.
And
that sounds right.
Lennon was also, of course, in there for 7 years, but he did not have a number one hit in 1971. So McCartney was the first one to hold that.
Not that these guys would have been keeping score.
Oh,
certainly not in this era. No.
There was hardly a rivalry at all between Lennon and McCartney. Lennon was not a big fan of the album Ram that this came from. What a surprise. But he did like parts of Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey. And it's really possible to like parts of this because that's all it's made of. It's put together, it's kind of thrown together.
It is.
With a bunch of different little parts.
That's right.
And I think they work incredibly well together. Other people aren't big fans of this. But you know, it's kind of the sort of thing that McCartney was doing on Abbey Road.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It sounds like it could have been drawn from Abbey Road. Frankly, if you were to tell us that, oh yeah, this is from those sessions, yeah, sure, exactly. It sounds like it.
So anyway, that's
well, Ram has its detractors, but I think Ram is his finest solo effort, and this is this is a very unusual song, and it very much is not sort of in keeping with the songs on Ram. Ram is very much a kind of down home, kind of stripped back effort, and which I think it's his great strength. This is a very odd song, and it's a very odd song on Ram. But you know, he had the kind of touch, though, right? That, I mean, certainly in this era, that if McCartney put something out, the people gravitated toward it, and I think there's no better example of that than this, because this is a very, very odd, kind of almost slapped together number. It's a certain kind of whimsy and, you know, charm to it, but there you go, though. I mean, it's a huge hit for Paul and Linda.
Well, I think it speaks to his genius that he's able to put something like that out there and not just worry to death about, well, is it, you know, isn't it a little bit too whimsical or strange or whatever? It just puts it out there. By the way, I just want to mention real quickly, the orchestration for this song was done by George Martin and Paul McCartney himself directed the orchestra, 20% of whom didn't even know who he was. Because
just think about that for a second. So you sort of have to wonder about that. First of all, you have to wonder if that's true. And then if that is true, were these people like, I don't know what, did they just miss the entire 60s? I mean, seriously, if you think about this, how can musicians not be aware of the Beatles, of McCartney? How can that even possibly be? Well, okay. This is
I don't have it right here. Who exactly related that?
I'm not disputing the quote, but you know what I'm saying? It's like, if you just think about it for a second, it's like, how in the hell can that possibly be?
Are you a sleeper? Have you been in a coma for the last 10 years?
Oh, that's exactly right. I mean, these are musicians, for God's sake. This is the world they operate in. Okay, well, there you go.
There you go.
Nope, there you go. So, okay, that's fantastic. And so, again, one song after the next, and in mid-September at number 6, is a group called the Undisputed Truth. We're essentially sort of house musicians in Motown, house singers, primarily background singers. And the song was Smiling Faces Sometimes. And so the Undisputed Truth, again, primarily consisted of, is sort of a floating cast of characters, but primarily consists of people like Pep Harris, Billy Ray Calvin, and Brenda Evans. But what made the song was, again, the song itself, which was a product of the team of Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong, who are, I mean, we talked about Lieber and Stoller a minute ago. I mean, these are Whitfield and Strong. I mean, they're in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Heard it through the grapevine. I can't help myself. Just my imagination. On and on and on it goes. They also produced the effort as well. It's really quite a remarkable song.
Oh yeah, Whitfield was responsible for the psychedelicization of Temptations.
That's right. That's exactly right.
And wrote their psychedelic things, took over producing them for Motown from Smokey Robinson.
Yes.
And so yeah, he had already proven his chops before we even got to this song.
No, that's exactly it. It's no, it is a song about deceit and distrust and kind of backstabbing. One of so many songs of this era that have a certain kind of menace to them, and there's certain kind of darkness to them in a way. But it also, I think, speaks to the fact that that Motown had really grabbed hold of what it meant to be, the notion of what a popular song was, right? And that Motown's reach now was very, very broad. And so we know where Motown started, right, with, Smokey Robinson and Martha and the Vandellas, and of course, eventually the Supremes and so on, right? But as you mentioned, this whole psychedelic soul thing, Motown's its breadth was really, it was really something. And they were touching people in lots of different areas in terms of popular music, and they were immensely successful. This was on the Gordy imprint initially, and then Tamla Motown later. Motown was in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, was just seemingly unstoppable. It's just amazing success. So there we have at number 6, Smiling Faces Sometimes by the Undisputed Truth, which would be their only hit. Again, another Motown act at number 7, a very different kind of Motown act. And that's Rare Earth with I Just Want to Celebrate, which is, I suspect that if anybody knows a Rare Earth song, it would be either this one or their cover of Get Ready. It comes from their One World LP, which charted in the high 20s on the LP chart. Rare Earth was a group that was most famous for covers and interpreting the work of others. They, of course, famously were the first sort of rock act signed by Motown in an effort by Gordy to sort of expand the label and expand its reach. And I don't know that really Motown had a lot of success in the rock genre, apart from Rare Earth.
It's also on the Rare Earth label, right?
It's on the Rare Earth. Yeah, it's the Rare Earth imprint. But Rare Earth is one of those bands that had a tremendous following regionally. They were out of Michigan, and while they had some chart hits, a handful of them here. They had 6 songs in the top 40 overall. They were sort of a vaguely national band, but in the Midwest they were incredibly famous. Which gets me to, I think, a larger point from this era is that even though we're talking about national charts, there was still a very strong kind of regional influence in the United States. That bands could be really popular in one part of the country, not popular in another. That charts could be, or songs could be very popular in one part of the country, but not necessarily all that popular nationally. Rare Earth came from Michigan. Michigan was a hotbed of music. Boy, it's unbelievable in this era, right? You're talking about Seeger, you're talking about the MC5, you're talking about the Stooges, you're talking about Grand Funk. And so, while Rare Earth was a known commodity around the country, if you were in the Midwest, if you were in the upper Midwest, oh my God, right? This was, Rare Earth was the band for you. And so just wanted to mention, again, I would just want to celebrate the Rare Earth hit, which is at number 7 in mid-September of 71. Wow. So at number 8, you have this unique interpretation of at this point, I think even a fairly well-known song by a fairly well-known artist. It's just, there's some different worlds coming together here. At number 8, you have The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down by Joan Baez.
Yeah. And some people might consider it a collision of worlds.
Yes.
There's some suggestion. All right. First of all, The Night They Drove Dixie Down was written by Robbie Robertson, Canadian. Did a lot of the songwriting for the band. Started off as kind of a house band for Bob Dylan.
Yeah, first for Ronnie Hawkins, and then for Bob Dylan. You're right, absolutely. Toured the world with Bob Dylan.
And this song came from their second album. The first one, Music from Big Pink. The second one, called The Band, or sometimes referred to as the Brown Album.
Right.
But it never charted for the band.
No, that's right.
Although it was Levon Helms at the mic. Just an incredible.
It's incredible. Oh, it's incredible. You're absolutely right. That's the word.
And I never get sick of watching the live version of this from The Last Waltz.
It's on, yes. Yes. Amazing.
So that was the last time in the film for the concert, The Last Waltz. It was the last time that he performed the song. And the word is that he stopped performing it out of protest because of what Joan Baez did to it.
Is that right?
And
what? Really?
Yes. And it's Joan Baez's version is a very different song. And
yeah,
she even has some different lyrics. She changed the lyrics unknowingly. She sang the lyrics that she had understood having listened to the song. And that was the basis of that. She, when she performs it in concert now, she sings the original lyrics, but she's responsible for some heavy-duty royalties going in the direction of
going in the direction of Robbie Roberts, which is also, it's also part of the issue with the band, because they were, famously, the split was quite acrimonious there during the time of the Last Waltz, and the acrimony was largely over royalties. That Robbie Robertson was the sole songwriter, but the band was such a they collaborated on everything, and there was always a lot of dispute in the band about where that money was going, and it all went to Robertson, and the rest of the guys didn't like that at all.
And Robertson basically had the musical base for this song without knowing what the song was going to be about, and then he came up with this idea. And Levon Helm, who was the only American in the band.
That's right, from Arkansas.
Arkansas. Took Robertson to the library and helped him research the background to the song. And listening to the song, you definitely get the feeling that there is some definite historical facts involved.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
I worked on the Danville train when Stoneman's cavalry came and tore up the tracks again.
Right.
Wow. Okay, that's fairly specific stuff.
It's very specific. Yes.
So, but it's part of what makes the song so incredible.
Oh, that's right.
You have a feeling that you're really listening to the story of one of the guys that was involved. One of the foot soldiers.
That's exactly right. Well, that's when Levon Helm sings that. It's almost chilling because you just get a sense of it's like this first person thing. It's like, participant observation. Yeah, you're there. And which just makes the Joan Baez version so freaking weird.
He really makes the song his own, and that's what makes it so strange that the only person who had a hit with it
Oh yeah,
was Joan Baez.
Oh yeah.
Clearly an icon of folk music, and this certainly fits into that category somehow.
Yes.
But she recorded it for her Blessed Are album. The B-side was When Time Is Stolen, and it was released in August 1971. Now, Blessed Are was mostly covers of a lot of different things, and I think I'm even going to check out this album because there's so many good songs on it from people like Bob Dylan, of course. It's no surprise that Joan Baez covers Dylan, but also Chris Christopherson and just a whole bunch of other people. So one thing we should probably talk about real briefly is the fact that this song on the surface can be seen as glorifying the lost cause mythology, right?
Yes. I think a service reading, and I think that's oftentimes the confusion surrounding the song, right?
And what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think that's one way of reading the song, is that the Civil War was this kind of noble moment, that there's on some level nothing to apologize for, that the South's way of life was it was essentially a kind of righteous cause, and that what happened to the South was this great tragedy. I think that's a simplistic kind of, that's certainly, I think, on keeping with the lost cause, I think that's a simplistic view of the song, but a deep reading of the song, I think, suggests something, I think, a little bit more nuanced. But that was the problem. That was the challenge with the song, right? That was the pushback for the song, even when the band did it, particularly with Levon Helm at the mic, was that it was somehow an apology.
Yeah, a guy from Arkansas, and certainly he sings it with a certain pathos.
Oh yeah, absolutely does.
Voice, and you're listening to Virgil Kane, but who was Virgil Kane? Well, he wasn't a rich plantation owner.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't a slave owner. And when Robert E. Lee comes through his farm, the army just pretty much takes whatever they need.
That's exactly right.
And leaves them even more impoverished than they were before.
That's exactly right. The South was full of these poor white farmers, these yeoman farmers who had very, very little. They all dreamed of something bigger, which also included, plantations and the enslavement of people, but these were just dirt poor farmers, and they lost everything in the war. Not just financially, but also then I think a sense of self, a sense of identity. And I think that you get that with the Virgil Kane, particularly when Helm is singing as if, Virgil Kane. I mean, there's something there that the loss is just palpable. Yeah, this is no lost cause thing. This is just pain. This is suffering. This is, it's debilitating.
Yeah, and he's getting it from both sides, right?
That's exactly right.
Yankees kill his brother, and Lee's army comes through and
that's exactly right.
That's
right. Yeah, there's nothing glorious in this. Yeah, that's it. It's again, Joan Baez, a storied career, even by this point, right, in 1971, a storied career in folk music, a real folk icon. And I don't know that it's not, what's the complaint of this about Baez is that, I don't really know what the complaint is. It's just there was a lot of disgruntlement about this song amongst particularly fans of the band, who just thought it was a kind of abomination that she sang it, and then it became a hit. And I guess that's really the real rub, is that she sold a lot more records than the band did with this particular song.
And I think this is one of those songs where you could really say there's not need for a cover, because once Leave on the Helm has sang it, you have the authoritative version. Where are you going to go from there? Well,
I think that's right, but you know, the traditional, I mean, that's folk music though, right? The folk music is built on the shoulders of, and this is what folk musicians do, is that they, well, do they appropriate the music of others? I don't know. I mean, some critics would say that, and maybe that's what's happening here. It's this interesting kind of meta debate when it comes to this particular song, right? You've got the song itself, and then you've got this recording of the song and this particular artist, and it's just kind of one thing on top of the next. But again, really quickly, right? It's 1971, and so at 1 minute, you know, you'll hear, then on the radio, you'll hear, you know, "Go Away, Little Girl," and then you'll hear "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down." I mean, it just, you know,
it's my name.
It just, you know, it just, it's all right there. I mean, this is all bubbling to the surface at this time. So there we have "The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down," the band song sung by Joan Baez.
And listen, we're gonna include both versions in the
yeah, absolutely
playlist.
No, I agree. I mean, to amplify your point, the band's version is the authoritative version with Levon Helm on the mic. That is just, I mean, there's just no other. I mean, it's one of the, yeah, it's incredible. It's the kind of song, quite frankly, it's the kind of song that history teachers play to their students, right? To get some sense of the perspective of poor white Southerners who are just seeing their world just collapse from, as you suggested earlier, like kind of coming at them from both sides. It's just,
and Robbie Robertson, just the last thought along this lines, that he wanted to write a song that only Levon Helm could sing.
Yeah, and he did. He achieved it. Yeah, it's I mean, all in praise of the band, right? That at their height, I don't know that any group, they just achieved something that was just magnificent. Those first couple of albums of the band that you mentioned a minute ago are just supreme. It's just extraordinary stuff. What an era for music. And so at number 9, okay, so at number 9, we talked about this group last week. It's the Bee Gees with "How Can You Mend a Broken Heart." This is one of their landmark songs, yeah. And we did talk about the Bee Gees a bit last week regarding this. At number 10, then you have this group, the Dramatics, with "What You See Is What You Get."
Yeah, and it's strange. This is the only song on in the top 10 this month that I don't remember ever having heard. Is
that right? Okay.
Yeah, I don't remember it at all. But clearly it was a hit for the Dramatics, and this was on the Volts Stax label, and it's one of the things that's interesting about it is that the lead singing part gets traded back and forth between the various members of the group. There's Ron Banks, the bass singing Willie Ford, "Look at Me," and we had William Ouija Howard coming in for certain parts. The songwriter was Tony Hester, who did some other songwriting for the Stax stable. This was released in June 1971 with the B-side "Thankful for Your Love." It made it to number 20. Yep. I'm sorry, the album, the debut studio album, "What You See Is What You Get," by the Dramatics, peaked at number 20 on the Billboard 200 and number 5 on the Billboard R&B chart. So the success of this song helped propel their the success of the album as well. Yeah.
So there you have the Dramatics at number 10. So let's cherry pick a little bit in the rest of what's popular in mid-September 1971. At at number 15, you've got this group from England, The Who, with Won't Get Fooled Again from the Who? From blanking on the name. Who's next? LP, good grief. The Who. It's interesting. The Who, obviously a major, one of the powerhouses in popular music at this time, never a big singles band.
Great albums.
It really is one of maybe their greatest album, but yeah, one of their great albums. It comes, of course, from the Townsend's Lifehouse project, which he embarked upon following Quadrophenia. The Lifehouse project, again, was to be a kind of multimedia spectacle in a world where music had been banned, and it never really came to pass. I mean, eventually Townsend released some of the songs related to Lifehouse in 1999, but a few of these songs on Who's Next come directly from that writing period and that particular focus, and Won't Get Fooled Again is largely believed to be part of that as well. You know, it's interesting. The single is it comes in at about 3.5 minutes. The album cut is much more extensive. It's 5 minutes longer at 8.5 minutes. And much of what we know from Won't Get Fooled Again comes from the unique combination of Townsend putting the sounds of a Lowry organ into a synthesizer, a VCS3 synthesizer for what it's worth. And you get this kind of interesting kind of loop, which at the time was just revolutionary. This sound that basically sort of leads into the song is, it's really never been heard before, this kind of experimentation. And so one of the things I don't think that Townsend gets enough credit for is his wizardry in the studio. He was very much almost a kind of avant-garde artist in this era, in his use of electronics, particularly in this album.
Bob O'Reilly, another example of that.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, he was doing a lot of experimentation at this time.
That's exactly right. And that's one of the things that makes this particular song so interesting, is that you have this kind of revolutionary synth sound, almost avant-garde synth sound, then coupled with this incredible kind of power rock, power chords, and very anthemic lyrics, right? Maybe at Townsend's most incendiary in terms of his lyrics. Revolution is in the air, and it's certainly in the language of this song. You know, the Won't Get Fooled Again becomes, the Who they were a very important studio act, and their albums are very, very interesting. But at their peak as a live act, they were just extraordinary. And this was, in any Who show, really kind of then and now, frankly, this is sort of the high watermark. This particular song, Won't Get Fooled Again, is when the four of them were playing, when you had Pete Townsend, Roger Daltrey, John Entwistle, and Keith Moon together, they were, this was a tour de force, right? You have four supreme artists at full voice, in full motion here. And it's just an extraordinary song. It's weird that the single it feels very truncated. If you know the album cut, It feels very truncated. But this is at number 15. I think I've asked you this before, Dave, but the Who only had one top 10 song in the U.S. Ever. Do you know what that would be? So one top 10 pop hit, if you will.
I think you did ask me before, and
I did ask you.
I Can See for Miles.
And you are correct, sir. Once again, it hit number 9 in 1967. That's the only top 10 hit that they've ever had on the singles chart. Obviously, they ruled the album charts. This particular album, Who's Next, peaked at number 4 on the 8 LP chart. Which
Woodstock did a lot for their American.
That's right. It
really helped their American following a lot.
It certainly did. Even though their experience at Woodstock was, they weren't super pleased with any of it. And Townsend famously, this is where he pushed Abbie Hoffman off the stage or slugged him or something, right? There was some sort of first physical encounter.
Off my fucking stage, I think.
There we go. Oh, so this song, again, I think people who know music know this song. This song ended up in of course, Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of of all time. You know, that list, I just want to mention this real quickly. Rolling Stone has this list. They've had this list for a number of decades now.
And they've redone it.
They've redone it. They've redone it this past week. At the first time in 17 years, they've redone it. And there's a lot of buzz about what they've done to my list, Ma. And so
what they did to our list is they massacred it. But I think it's a completely valid thing to do.
Oh, I think so too.
You know, but there's all sorts of people and songs that I haven't even heard of in the list now. That wasn't the case in 2004.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And so us two old guys, bitching about this new list, but it's, but again, I think there's no question about it that Won't Get Fooled Again is one of the great songs of all time. It's one of Who's greatest songs, if not maybe the greatest song.
And you mentioned the time, of course, there was a lot of revolutionary thought and sentiment in the air.
Yes.
But this song is more than skeptical about.
Well, I think that's right.
What revolution brings.
Well, I think that's right, and I think reflecting the kind of jaundiced style that Townsend, I think, always had, that I think a lot of people had by the time we get to 1971. What are the fruits of this particular revolution? You know, really, come on, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the critique of these lyrics is completely appropriate. But you were right before when you said it's one of the concert highlights. If you think about a Who concert, what I think about is lasers and dry ice. And Roger Daltrey walking up and then screaming, "Yeah!"
Yes, this is
getting into the last part of this.
It is. If you were to sort of boil down what a rock moment would be, what in a concert moment would be, it would be that.
Yeah.
That explosive moment. It's just it's extraordinary. And so, Townsend. This is I know. Is Who's Next? Is Who's Next really the high watermark for the Who? I think it might be. I think you can argue that it really is, that this album, with all the deep cuts, going mobile, getting in tune, all of that is, I think this is it.
Although you can make arguments for other ones as well. Who Are You? Quadrophenia. Strong stuff.
Sure, absolutely strong stuff. Yeah, so there we go. So we have Won't Get Fooled Again at number 15. Just cherry pick a little bit more. At number 17, you've got Three Dog Night at their, I guess what they say, their imperial phase. Everything they put out that really just went through the roof. This is a very odd song though, for Three Dog Night. This is Liar from a bit bitter to say the least. Yes, from their Naturally LP. As it says, ain't that what you said? Ain't that what you said? Ain't that what you said? Liar. I remember, this is the same group, on the same album. Okay, so on the same album from Naturally, there are 3 singles: One Man Band, Liar, and Joy to the World. Now, and Joy to the World was a hit, right? Spring, summer of 71. And you pair that against Liar, you can't even believe it's just really, really jumps out at you.
Well, you can see why they thought they may need something a little bit more upbeat.
Yeah, I guess. Oh my Lord.
But this is really okay. Clearly, they didn't write Liar.
No, they didn't. We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah.
Relied on songwriters for their material, but it occurs to me again and again, some of the best albums and some of the best rock and roll are produced by people who are just in a state of rebound, just had a nasty breakup behind them, and are just processing that in their lyrics, in their songs. And this Liar, who wrote this? Whoever wrote it must have been in that stage of the process.
Well, let's just talk. Because you're absolutely right. I mean, the best rock and roll is, you're talking about a very kind of specific emotion. The heights of heights, the low of lows. real emotion. That was oftentimes the wellspring for a great song. This is Russ Ballard. Russ Ballard wrote this. Russ Ballard was the guitarist and vocalist of Argent, which in the United States, Argent, again, this was Rod Argent's band. Rod Argent was in the Zombies. It's exactly right. And so Russ Ballard wrote Hold Your Head Up, sang Hold Your Head Up. He co-wrote it with Chris White. But Rod Argent, I think you can make an argument that we've talked about this already even today a couple different times, but in terms of sort of great songwriters in the rock era, I mean, Rod Argent is responsible for Free Me, Roger Daltrey's hit from the 1980. I Know There's Something Going On, the Frida song, the single from that. New York Groove with the Ace Frehley made a hit, Winning, which was a hit for Santana. He also wrote Since You've Been Gone, which is the great song from Head East and from Rainbow. Yeah, Head East does this. It's fantastic. He also wrote this America song, You Can Do Magic, which was a sort of late career hit from him. He has a lot of range as a songwriter, and he's, it's just interesting that one guy can pen so many different songs from so many different people over the span of many, many years. I mean, so it shows that kind of versatility. So it's Russ Ballard's number. But just back to Three Dog Night for a second. 1971. 1971 for Three Dog Night. Joy to the World, a #1 hit. Liar peaks at #7. Old Fashioned Love Song, later in 1971, which we'll talk about, peaks at #4. Never Been to Spain. Late 1971, peaks at #5. I mean, come on. I mean, Three Dog Night, I mean, they own the charts.
Three Dog Night replaced the Monkees as my favorite group.
Yeah, my guess is that was probably true for lots of people in this era. And maybe the less said about that, the better. I don't know. But no, that's wrong. No, it's just, it's interesting. We're going to include in the reading list.
10 years old, man.
I know, it's a cheap shot. We're going to include in the reading list 2 articles from Rolling Stone about Three Dog Night from this era, who they spend, Rolling Stone writers, they oftentimes spent time with the band while they're on the road. And it is both of them are just tales of incredible debauchery. And Three Dog Night, they lived the rock lifestyle, and they damn near died from the rock lifestyle. And certainly one of the members, Corey Negron, just about coked himself to death. It's really, really interesting, to see how the group dealt with success or really didn't deal with success. And maybe they could have never really kind of maintained this kind of trajectory, probably not, but they just fell off the cliff in a couple of years. And those articles, I think, we'll include them in the reading list. They show you this very, very clearly. It's just, let's cherry pick a couple more. At number 30, you've got Bobby Russell's Saturday Morning Confusion. And I really would like to hear you talk a little bit about this.
I love that song. Saturday Morning Confusion, a novelty song by Bobby Russell, as you said. And between 66 and 73, Bobby Russell had 5 singles on the Hot Country Songs chart. And one of them was this crossover hit, Saturday Morning Confusion, which is about a family man hungover on Saturday morning. Yeah. And just trying to get a little bit of peace and just wishing the noise would stop, right? And it's funny, it's clever, and it's just a lot of fun to listen to. So, was a favorite of mine. Still love listening to it. Interesting. Russell also wrote several other really well-known hits, like The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia.
Yes, that's right.
Made a hit by
Vicki Lawrence.
Vicki Lawrence, with whom he was married, or to whom he was married from 1972 to 1974.
Oh, that I didn't know. Yeah, the young Vicki Lawrence, who was then part of the Carol Burnett show.
Absolutely right. And Carol Burnett did a duet of Saturday Morning Confusion with Bing Crosby on her show.
What?
We will include that on our playlist.
I just, if we could, I think I heard you say that Carol Burnett did a duet with Bing Crosby, Saturday Morning Confusion. Bing Crosby? Oh, we got, well, there you go. Golly, how about that?
Well, and I think their music director should be shot because he sped it up just a bit. He increased the tempo just a bit, and it was too fast. But you be the judge.
All right.
It's in the playlist. You can watch it yourself.
Very good.
All right.
Okay.
Russell also wrote Little Green Apples. He also wrote Honey.
Both Bobby Goldsboro songs, right?
Song. Of course, Little Green Apples was a hit for Roger Miller.
Roger Miller too. Okay, yeah.
And O.C. Smith in the U.S., but Roger.
That's
Miller,
right. There we go. That's right.
Had a hit in the U.K. with that. It was a favorite song of Frank Sinatra's. So
yeah,
and
Bobby,
and this was not his only. This was not his only novelty song. He also wrote a song for Ray Stevens called Camp. Where the heck are we? Where the heck are we? Where the heck
sounds like like an Ali Sherman knockoff, right? Hello, mother. Hello, father.
Yeah.
Exactly, where are we?
Exactly. So this is, but definitely a Ray Stevens type of.
Oh, Ray Stevens in the 70s, in the early 70s. Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, there
Russell
you go.
was responsible for that as well. Okay, so he had his successes, but this was, I think, his single biggest hit.
Okay, cool. So there we go. So cherry picking a little bit again, Saturday Morning Confusion at number 30 with the aforementioned Bobby Russell. Last song we want to talk about today is from an Australian artist who is just making waves in the United States at this point in 71. We'll certainly hear more from her in the United States in years to come. Her name is Olivia Newton-John. And the song is her cover of Dylan's If Not For You, which right now in mid-September is at number 32. So let's talk a little bit about Olivia Newton-John, the song, Bob Dylan, maybe other things that are happening right now.
If Not For You. This was really her first international hit.
That's right.
And it put her on the map. Was later included on her If Not For You album, which was her debut album as well.
Yeah.
She was gaining some prominence and some notoriety in England and in Australia, primarily opening for Cliff Richard in his concert tours, and she was on his TV show, It's Cliff Richard. The interesting thing about this is the connections that were being made. And members of the Shadows went on to do the producing for her early stuff, and so that Cliff Richard Shadows thing, that's something that really dominated her early career.
Yeah.
But this was, as you said, actually written by Bob Dylan, and Olivia Newton-John is not the first singer to take a Bob Dylan song and make it better.
I think that's a fair point. Yes.
But this was one of them. Actually,
I think that's right.
She did it. It was modeled more after the George Harrison cover of this song,
which had appeared like a year earlier, or was it the same year? It's All Things Must Pass, right?
Right, exactly. From his triple album, All Things Must Pass, he covered it. And listening to this, you'll notice that the guitar riff, the intro, it's very Harrison-esque. So she very definitely took his take on this, and then her vocals. I was a big Olivia Newton-John fan, as most young men that I knew were. She had a very pleasant, sweet voice, and she was just very, very attractive.
Yeah, she was the fresh-faced young thing from Australia who I think early in, at least in this period of her career, was really marketed as much as a country artist. In fact, the slide on this particular song, and there's a sort of twang to it. I mean, it's very Nashville friendly. And I think that she got a fair amount of airplay on country music stations with this song and a couple of her other early releases. Of course, eventually she moves on to a different kind of phase of her career and becomes a kind of international pop star. And there's no question about that. But this is a very interesting era, right? Because you see a lot of these Dylan covers emerging. It is in this month, in September, mid-September 1971, that this particular cover of Rolling Stone is released. And speaking of Bob Dylan and all of this that's going on around us, we should talk a little bit about the concert for Bangladesh, which took place then in early August of 1971, just basically 6 weeks or so earlier. And again, this is the cover.
It's funny that they call that the George Harrison Bob Dylan concert.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because Bob Dylan, I think, just played a couple songs.
Well, this is okay.
There were so many people involved, and
let's talk about this for a second. You're exactly right, because the concert for Bangladesh is in fact a concert that was organized to provide famine relief for the new country of Bangladesh, which had gained its independence just a year or so earlier from Pakistan. It formerly was known as East Pakistan. There was a tremendous famine happening in Bangladesh at the time. Bangladesh sits, flooding too? I thought yes. Bangladesh sits at the delta of a number of huge rivers flowing out of East Asia. And so most of Bangladesh is at or just slightly above sea level. And so when it floods, it all floods. And so there was a relief effort put together. The organizers of this concert were George Harrison and Ravi Shankar. Ravi Shankar, the Indian musician, famous Indian musician, Harrison's great friend. Shankar, who had some historical links to that part of East Asia. It's amazing, and I don't know if amazing is the word to sort of leave Shankar off the cover here and suggest that this is a Bob Dylan concert, because like you said, he played a couple of songs. I mean, come on. But with the concert for Bangladesh was groundbreaking. I think we both agree that this is the start of a kind of era in popular music where there was an effort to sort of directly channel profits from a particular event, a particular album, to a kind of relief effort. This is really the first of these. Later, this would be Bob Geldof's model, right, for Live Aid in the mid-1980s for famine relief for Africa.
Farm Aid after that?
Precisely, you got it. It's exactly right. Harrison famously had a lot of difficulty with both the record company and the film company. Harrison's belief going into it was that people would more or less just see the worthiness of the cause and sort of direct profits in that direction. And that, of course, wasn't the case. And Harrison talked at length about, what he learned in this particular experience and how he felt sort of burnt by it. The concert was, as you mentioned, a bunch of people were on it. Leon Russell led the band. You've got Keltner. I think Ringo makes an appearance. You've got, again, aforementioned Bob Dylan. Eric Clapton. Whole host of people, real who's who of people in this era, all of Harrison's friends. They actually had two shows on this day in early August, an afternoon matinee and then the evening show. Dave, you want to talk a little bit about the If Not For You, though, because if you watch the film, you'll see then Harrison and Bob Dylan singing If Not For You. And you want to just talk a little bit about, how that took place?
Yeah, well, Dylan's participation in the concert, apparently, it was kind of a last-minute thing. He had been asked to do it and was just keeping everybody kind of in limbo about whether he was going to come or not. But then he showed up, and much to many people's relief, because of course Bob Dylan was a heavy hitter.
That's right, exactly right.
So. And then they sat down and they practiced a number of songs, "Blowing in the Wind," something. I think "Blowing in the Wind" was the song that he played, or maybe he played two songs, but they practiced this one as well, "If Not For You," but it was not played in the concert. But their practice session, their rehearsal, was recorded and was included in the film.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's it's an odd circumstance. It makes sense from a marketing perspective that you would elevate Dylan's participation. He was still in the kind of recovery phase from that motorcycle accident. He had been in seclusion for a couple of years. He had appeared at the Isle of Wight Festival that summer, but the sightings of Dylan were pretty rare. And so to actually hear Dylan perform, to see him on the stage, was a big deal. And I mean, just to be frank, I mean, we're just a year or so removed from the dissolution of the Beatles, and so you get a Beatles sighting, and that's a big deal as well. The concert for Bangladesh was, I think, by most measures, a kind of modest success in terms of the actual money raised for famine relief. But again, it set an important model. The concert for Bangladesh, the trust fund still exists, that there's still a fund, that the George Harrison Fund for UNICEF, that if you buy the album, or if you buy the film, or if you watch a portion of the film on YouTube, that money then is directed toward that fund. It's still sending money for famine relief. So I thought that's kind of interesting, that even 50 years removed from the event, it still is generating some funds for the right thing.
Yeah, that is amazing. Just real briefly, if not for you, was one of relatively few straightforward love songs that Bob Dylan ever wrote. And he wrote that for his first wife, Sarah Dylan. And one of the first people that he played this with was Harrison. They played it during a session in New York on May 1st. Just very shortly after May 1st, 1970, very shortly after the breakup of the Beatles. And so there was a lot of speculation. Oh, George Harrison and Bob Dylan, kind of, are we getting kind of a traveling Wilburys together here?
Well, we'd have to wait. Yes, the budget's in the air, wasn't it?
30 years, but
30 years, we'll have to count our fingers and toes, but yeah, it would eventually happen. We'd have to be patient. Yeah, it's it's a very interesting era, but it's an era obviously rife with speculation, because the dissolution of the Beatles, the mysterious sort of circumstance surrounding Bob Dylan following the motorcycle accident, all of that there were certain kinds of gaps that were just the people wanted to fill. And so just the hint of a possibility, would send sort of people running to, like, oh, a new supergroup is emerging, this kind of thing. But it's a very vital era, right? I think that what we see here is are songs that I think are familiar to us today, right, in the 21st century, that these are songs that we know, in some cases we love, and they're all hitting the charts at roughly the same time, which just makes this a fascinating era to think about, to talk about. And when we head toward October next week, next month, it's really more of the same.
Yeah. Well, these are these songs that really informed my budding awareness of pop music. This is what made me think this is an exciting thing. Love listening to the radio. I'm going to start buying some 45s, things like that.
Yeah, that's right.
This was all happening in this year,
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think for so many people, 1971 is really an extraordinary year for music. I think there are people who, and I think with some justification, believe that 1971 is maybe the greatest year ever for popular music in the United States. I think a pretty strong case can be made for that, and we'll keep amplifying that next month when we talk about October charts, mid-October 1971. So, David, to lead us out here, what should people be aware of when it comes to Stephen Daves?
Okay. If you enjoyed this video, and we hope you did, you can follow us here at Stephen Daves. You can see more videos of this sort, 50 years ago this month, right up here. And you can check out our playlist. All the songs that we talked about can be found here. Highly recommend it. We'll see you next month.
See you next month. Again, remember, Stephen Daves on Twitter, Stephen Daves1 on Twitter. We'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Bye-bye.